research involving over 750 different organizations, and how these companies execute this sustainable change in their own practice. She's teaching executives and MBA students. She's also involved in SIG Diet as a leader, one of the members of the leadership group. SIG Diet is in our field, digital innovation, transformation, and entrepreneurship. It's a special interest group for scholars. So without much ado, let me introduce my colleague, Kathryn.
I feel very confined on this stage, so I might jump down and walk around, but it's my pleasure well, actually it's my most pleasure that I got to sit in the last few sessions, because now I feel like I could completely rewrite this presentation and what I wanted to talk about based on what other people have talked about. But reason why Youngjin wanted me to come was to talk about this idea of this digital skills gap idea. And I think just as a starting point, just to think about how you would define a digital skill. Like, what is a digital skill? When you think about digital skills, what is a digital skill? What comes to your mind? We'll make this a bit more interactive maybe than other ones. What comes to mind? What is a digital skill?
Data analysis.
Data analysis would be a digital skill. What else? Programming, coding? Automation, okay, interesting. So like process modeling, okay?
3D printing.
What? 3D printing, okay. Anybody else? Insight, so generating, like modeling, sort of data, working with data to create decision-making skills. Okay, so an interesting challenge for me at Queen's was about 3 years ago, was around the post-COVID, I was within COVID. I worked with our School of Computing really on the idea that the reason why the digital skills gap exists is because young students resist coding. They don't want to code. And so the principal of the university said to me, Kathryn, can you build a program that is no code, low code? Because that's when no code, low code came in, and they were like, can you do that? I was like, I don't know. So this was the work I did, to Youngjin's point, around walking around to different companies and studying product owners and what product owners actually do. And lo and behold, I found what? They actually don't code. They actually don't necessarily do a lot of data analytics. They do a lot of other stuff.
When you say product owner, do you mean a digital product owner or any sort of product owner?
So I'm talking about a product owner in the digital space. So definitely, kind of, and I want to talk about this idea that Silicon Valley took this product management idea and put it into their organizations and basically created this new product management discipline, of which it works for them, it works for Google, it works for Amazon, but then the companies I was talking to was trying to lift that and put it into their organizations. And the problem is they weren't digital first companies, they're legacy companies, much like your organizations. And so I actually want to put a little bit of language around this digital product management idea. And so that was my challenge. Could I build a program with no code, low code? Could I create product owners and product managers that couldn't do these digital skills? And then it makes me question, so what are the digital skills that are missing in today's day? So that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about. And so if we start by thinking about what companies like Salesforce are doing, what WordPress is doing, what Figma, if anybody's familiar with Figma, these are all tools that are very accessible to non-coding people. Right, so I did a startup in my young life. I worked for Sun Microsystems before I became an academic, and I could code in Java, but I really don't code a lot in Java. But I could code. That was the big thing. So I could lead teams because I knew how to code in Java, but I never actually was sitting down coding in Java. And so it was a computational thinking knowledge that I needed in order to lead these teams, not necessarily getting into the coding. So another part of this story was we started a Master's of Management in Data Analytics about 5 years ago. And in that program, we learned that students get bogged down with Python. So we teach them all this great thing about data structures and data cleaning, and they all focus on Python. And they get that's basically all they learn because they're into Python. And then we talk to companies and they're like, well, there's so many other parts of data governance, great example, right? Where they would prefer they knew more about that rather than just coming on as Python coders. And so really, to get started, I want to talk a little bit about how I built this kind of new set of skills and where I pulled from. And this is helpful for me just to show you. So this is a presentation that we do across different venues. But if you look at me, I have a PhD in digital technology. So my background is in technology management and information systems development. I know the life cycle, I understand the life cycle, I know how to build systems and software, I know how to do that. And I know how to manage projects. That's what I know how to do. And I think those are digital skills. Like, they're important skills to have. My colleague, Jake Brower, is in marketing. And this is where the product piece comes from. Product marketing, or product management, comes from marketing. And when you look at product, it's understanding the marketplace, it's understanding your competitors, understanding how to align these products to the needs of customers. So I was like, I need Jake, right? Those are important, quote unquote, digital skills because we're building products for market needs. So understanding design thinking, as an example, I would say that's a huge digital skill, design thinking. And then we wandered over to the School of Computing because we were like, we can't do this by ourselves, we need them. And that colleague, Nick Graham, said to me, well, geez, Kathryn, there's lots of skills we have. We have software engineering. That's a whole bunch of digital skills in there. We have architecture integration, and we have human-computer interaction. And so all these skills kind of come into say, and then we're like, well, no wonder you're having difficulty filling the skills gap because universities drive out graduates in software engineering, in human-computer interaction, in marketing, in information systems. They're not actually graduating students that have a more cross-sectional representation of skills. And so that's really what I kind of want to spend my time with you today, is just getting us to think about, right, what is the skill set? And then I want to start with a case study on looking historically at the work we've done in data to see if we can't use that as a launch pad to think about what comes next. So I prepared this as kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, so story. So I start this one with the whole idea of the good. So if we look at the good, we can look at, this trend in deployed artificial intelligence and exploring artificial intelligence across the globe. I think companies today, and it sounds like that's true of the companies in this room, have bought into the idea that data matters, that artificial intelligence is important. We're making those investments. We sort of get it. So that's the good, right? As the trend is up, we're getting more efficient ways to gather this data. We're getting better tools to build these artificial intelligence systems. And so we're like, that's a good thing. If we go on to the next, sort of the bad is that we start to look at significant barriers, and that was already talked about today, right? The barriers within an organization that make artificial intelligence investments and investments in data analytics difficult to generate value from. So for example, lacking a clear strategy, right? Lack the talent with the appropriate skills. For sure we need, this is where Python skills come in and data governance skills come in. But we're also operating within silos. And so that creates this end-to-end solution. I'm like, that's a digital skill. I mean, how many of you are good at managing cross-functional teams? Like, that's a skill. I would argue it's a digital skill because every digital initiative I've ever ran has been across the organization. And what's interesting about product owners is that you influence hundreds, but you have authority over how many? None, right? So you actually need different leadership skills. So that's a skill. The other one is lacking leadership ownership. So the whole idea of providing the ability to get a business case and understand experimentation and to demonstrate value, those are all important skills. And then finally, Lacking the infrastructure from a technology perspective, we're back to now these are some technical skills for sure that we talked about earlier. But we definitely have some headwinds or some organizational barriers that are getting in our way. And then this is the ugly. And I think this is definitely the state of the companies I work for. Executives are starting to get antsy, right? So they're now like, we've invested all this money, and where are these big returns that you've said that you're going to generate for us? And so we start to look at, a couple things happening. One, questioning the investment, and two, questioning the actual insights that the AI is providing when they go against their experience. So now we're starting to get distrust in organizations around artificial intelligence, or just ignorance. They're like, yeah, I know what the report says, but I'm actually not going to do that because I know better. And so now we're kind of like, all this investment, all this time and energy, and Deloitte's doing some great research around the idea that executives just aren't comfortable. Organizations just aren't comfortable to be data-driven, which then I think, okay, well maybe there's some other skills packed into that around what we talked about earlier today, organizational change, right? Changing mindsets. There's a lot of work to be done with regard to just navigating this change in the way we do business. So what I want to talk about is just a shift in perspective. And that is, can we reframe these technology things in this idea of a digital product? Is digital product language more accessible for companies than technical language? And I don't know how I feel about this. Actually, I put this slide together. I'm like, even on the plane ride down, I'm like, I'm not sure how I feel about this, because as a technologist, I've got a lot of credit in my career by having big names behind me, right? This Kathryn, she does artificial intelligence. That's kind of nice, because it sort of makes me feel like I know something and I have a big muscle that I can push. But I wonder sometimes if we made the language a little bit more accessible around the idea of digital products, whether or not we might be able to orchestrate these changes a little bit differently. Just something to think about. So a thought exercise for you is, what is a digital product? We think about, like, it's another big word, but what is a digital product? I mean, are there any in this room? When you think about what digital products do you use day in and day out? Yeah. Our phone is a digital, I would say our phone is a digital product that has a whole bunch of digital products inside it. So like when I call the lift, right, that's a digital product. Our watch, right, another digital product. And so they're sort of everywhere. We look, are these little things, and I've heard them called a few things today. I've heard some of the speakers call them a capability. I'm like, that's just a way of doing something differently. Right now we have people piping in from Germany this morning, right? Like, this is all, this whole idea of consuming, presenters through video conference streams, that felt different. And then I also think that there's ways that we can make those experiences even better, right? To be able to give them feedback or use interactive polls. But I've seen a few different things today that I would put in the digital product category. So what I want to do is show you this video and just look for all the little digital products that we come across every day in our lives. So that's a look into this program that we started. But I think for you, the opportunity is to think about what that digital product management muscle looks like inside your companies. Where does it live? Like even on the panel this morning, it lived in different places. There was the one group that had the innovation team and the technology team, and then the enabler team or the empowerment team in the middle, right? But this digital product management practice is new, and it's actually not taught in most universities. It's first in Canada. There's two other programs here in the United States that are like 6-week programs that are basically teaching what Silicon Valley does. But it's a real opportunity for us to think about what these digital skills look like, right down to you as a leader. Like, can you lead the same that you did, the way that you led people if you've been in this career for a while? Is it even the same how you lead people today versus how you led people maybe 20 years ago? And so all of these things become a real reflection on us. And I think it was best put, Jan talked about unlearning a whole bunch of things that we do and relearning ways that we manage. I like to think about in the digital age. It has nothing to do with digital. It has nothing to do with technology. It's just the age that we live in, and the expectations require us to think and look at things a little bit differently. So let's play a quick game. So when you think about digital products, let's think about this. We talked about our watch as a digital product. Now, what if I bought one of these? Well, actually, my husband bought one for me 3 years ago. It sits on my bedside table. It's always plugged in. It rarely ever hits my wrist because it holds me accountable. When I'm sitting there working, and I'll stand up and it'll say, wow, it looks like you're having a workout today. And I'm like, no, I literally just stood up for like 5 minutes. I don't like it because it holds me to accountable. So therefore, is it actually a digital product? It's a great question, right? It's something that we bought. Clearly, Apple made money from the watch that I bought, but I have no services attached to it. I don't actually use it. So they would define it as a product because they sold it to me, but I won't definitely buy another one because I do not use it. So then we think about this, right? Caterpillar doing, a number of different innovations to put digitalized capabilities into their equipment. Again, is that a digital product? People say, well, probably, right? But to think about all of the other products that have to supplement or complement that product. So to have it, it's like in your car. My husband and I, bought a car years ago with the parallel parking feature, that parks for you. So we were sitting in Kingston, and there was, Christmas time, so it was packed with people, and he hates to parallel park, so he's like, I'm going to try this thing. And so we were like, okay, so we hit the button, and we backed in. All was feeling really good. We backed in, and then we smashed into this junk box behind us in our brand new car. And the student was like, that's my car that you hit. They were like, yes, right? But we clearly didn't know how to use this parallel parking button. And so therefore, we've never used it again. So these are the sort of things here where you think about digital products to put the things inside. What is the responsibility then to be able to use those features? And in our government in Canada, they're depending on data coming from these to be able to understand pesticide use. But when people don't use it, there's a whole bunch of governance requirements that need to be put down, laws and policies and reporting structures that actually make that into a viable and valuable digital product. Right now, we're not using those digital products in that way. What about this? So another similar story. My stepdaughter was getting married, and she was talking about getting married, and then all of a sudden on my husband's phone, we started to get ads about engagement rings. So that's been shut off in our home for 3 years, right? Because we're like, no, this is, so it comes down to the ethics around these types of digital products. Is that a digital skill? I'm like, I think so. To understand the ethical implications of the stuff that we're building and the security issues. And then finally, you look at like Salesforce, and you think these are the people that are driving this whole no-code, low-code environment. They're like, you can build it yourself. It's so simple. You just plug everything in. And so I'm like, is that a digital product? Well, for sure. And it's also creating a capability for us to build a whole bunch of these other digital products. So what is a digital product really? It's anything, any digital, I would say any technology-enabled product that complements any business activity. And it effectively leverages technology to create value, drive revenue, reduce costs perhaps, improve interactions and experiences, transforms the way we live and work, ... It's kind of everything. And so whatever this thing is, it feels different, to your point, than the old product management discipline. Because products were kind of assumed to be, here's my consumer goods product, I build that, I put it on the shelf, it sells. This has a much more always in the making, more of a technology management, technology development feel that goes with it. And I think it is the lack of these skills, and I'm not putting the technical skills into that. Like, I think to be able to scale these products, you need to be able to at some point give these no-code prototypes to a technical team to build them. But my question for you to think about is, how far can you bring a prototype before you have to give it to a technical team? And we're learning, you can bring it pretty far. You can build out something in Figma pretty far, and then the technical team maybe has about 20% of the work left to do to code it in. The other thing we're finding is that we're actually reusing a lot of stuff we already have. So we're like, why would we build that? We already have it. We can just borrow it and repurpose it for this use. So our coding infrastructure blueprints are looking like, here's all the stuff that we have to build, and we've already built 40, 50% of it. So then we just lift that, repurpose it, right? Add a few of the capabilities through our coding team, and it's actually, the digital skills are weighing itself out to be more sort of managerial, design thinking, experimentation, agile, than the actual Python coding. Security, I think, is another big one. Like that one, we can't repurpose security. That one's one of the technical skills that definitely stay. So this is something for you to think about then is, as you invest in these digital capabilities, this is called the chasm, right? The whole idea that we bring this to early adopters, but we can't push it out. And it's the whole idea, is part of that because of the fact that the digital skills that you need are actually around the idea of scaling and really understanding what your users want, prototyping, experimenting to be able to push these innovations beyond the early adopter phase. So if we think about the idea of being stuck with technology enthusiasts, then the big question you leave with is, what are your biggest challenges as leaders in the organization, right? What is it about these digital products where your organization lacks the ability to push them beyond early adoption? And so you can think about these, is it around strategy, right? So the whole idea, definitely the perception that in this case, AI initiatives don't link with other parts of the business strategy, right? So aligning your strategy for these technology investments to other parts of the business strategy. Is it cultural, right? Is it the perception that AI isn't necessary or beneficial? Concerns about giving away the reins, the whole idea of that we're losing power, right? That becomes a change management issue, a leadership issue. What about psychological? So the whole idea that the perceived black box nature of algorithms create resistance. People don't trust machines. And so that becomes the whole idea of showing them, demonstrating what's inside. So I do a lot of work in fake news. And so fake news, one of the things that we're working on with these companies that are doing a lot of the fact checking is allowing people to understand for themselves why a piece of news has been labeled as true or not true. And that requires a totally different interface in designing that digital product, as opposed to just filtering it out and not letting you see it. They're saying, we think this is fake. This is why we think this is fake. Do you believe that or do you not believe that? And you can say, yes, I believe that. No, I don't believe that. And you can train your own, right, fake news little bot. And that requires a totally different way to design these digital products. Siloization we've already talked about earlier today, but I think the whole idea that we're carving off these organizations to sit separate to the business, right? So you put your digital lab or your IT organization that are carved off, and the whole idea is that a real digital skill kind of needs to proliferate, like go across the organization. These digital skills people need to be distributed into every business function. And then lastly, the one I mentioned earlier is around ethics, right? So the whole idea that, us thinking front end with really understanding the ethical issues that a lot of these digital products create, but thinking about that in ideation and discovery rather than thinking about it as something we mitigate at the end. So when we think about product management as a practice, this is just an infographic I pulled off of Google, but I think it's interesting because it has some big bubbles that I think are the buzzwords of today, right? Data, for sure. Not that data is not important, it's just not everything. When you look at design and empathy, that's design thinking. Everybody's like, data plus design thinking, we're good to go. Communication, leadership, but I guess my question is here, what's missing from this, right? What is missing in this product management kind of practice? What's missing around, this whole idea? Like I think about experimentation, it's not there. Prototyping, it's not there. The one I love, probably my biggest digital skill that I would encourage you to read about is systems thinking. So systems thinking to me is the biggest one, right? And that gets into the whole idea of thinking about your product as sitting within a system of other things. And so not a lot of people are talking about that at all, right? But it's just an opportunity for us to really think about what are these digital skills, and then we can go ahead and try and figure out how to acquire them. So this is our competency wheel for this new master's program. And it's small, so I'll kind of read it out to you. But the first thing we start with is what we call building a robust digital strategy. And that is something that thinks about both capabilities, so the business strategy behind these things that we're building, and what we call the solution strategy. So I don't know if you've ever worked, if you might be on the technical side of your team, but the technical teams I work with have a solution before I can even get my problem out of my mouth. They're like, yeah, wait a minute. And right to last summer, we were building an online community solution for a group in Calgary who was trying to really understand how to create a better sense of community amongst Chinese newcomers. So that was the issue that we were working with. They were like, what can we do? They were all chatting through WeChat. Like, Kathryn, can you build us something that really helps these Chinese newcomers feel they have a higher sense of community? And I'm like, sure. So I spent a lot of time understanding the system of integration and understanding Chinese culture and how they relate, how they define sense of community when they're living in Canada. And I did about 3 months of upfront work, and then I brought it to my technical team, and they're like, you need a website. I'm like, I'm not sure I need a website. They're like, yeah, you need a website. And I'm like, but I have all these requirements. They're like, no, you need a website. So they built a website. And the client came back and said, we don't want this website. And I'm like, I know, but I didn't have the ability to be able to push against the technical team. And it was because this company didn't have any infrastructure. They didn't have anything. Like, I couldn't build off anything. So therefore, yeah, they probably did need a website because they need some kind of digital thing to attach to. But it's that whole idea of like a robust strategy has a technology solution plus a business capability, plus an understanding of how those two things come together, and why that solution is the right answer to that capability. That's a lot fuzzier, because in my experience, they're more like Hail Mary passes from a strategy team to a technology team, or they're defined as a set of requirements. I'm not sure that works either. So I'm starting to use like causal maps. I love causal maps. because it actually tells me, not process maps, because they're not always, a process. Like, this is not a process. How to build a sense of community is not a business process. It's a system at play. So I'm using a lot of causal mapping, but really understanding what sits at the intersection between those two things. The second one we talk about is leveraging the right technology. And again, getting beyond tools. So again, I sold technology for Sun Microsystems during Y2K. Nobody can sell technology like me. But I also know why vendors should be questioned. When I sold Y2K, I was selling on fear. I was like, I don't know, this one big bank in Canada spent $5 million on their Y2K strategy. Another bank would say, we should probably spend 6. I'm like, probably, right? But the whole idea is vendors aren't going to help you. They're not going to give you the tools. They're not going to do the hard work. They're going to give you what they give you. Salesforce is a great example of this. If you push on Salesforce, they will build you the solutions that you want, leveraging the capabilities you already have. They can do it. They don't want to. But if you have good people internally that will push on your vendors, you'll get better solutions. So leveraging the right technology is not only about investing in AI or investing in the new technology, but it's also understanding the application well enough and leveraging either your technical team or your vendor group to really give you what you want, more specifically, not give you what you don't want. And I think that skill is an interesting digital skill. The third one is about, we call it effective leadership, and it really does talk about the tension between project and product. So project is probably, like when marketing came out with this new program for Queens, they called it the Master of Digital Project Management, and I almost lost my mind. First in the country. I'm like, there is no way project management is first in the country. Project management is a very well-defined discipline. People understand it, people know how to do it. IT project management, same. But digital product is a different skill. And one of the things I'm working on right now with a big insurance company is trying to get them to think about work and to budget work outside of the IT project artifact. Because every time they put anything into IT, they're like, that's an IT project, and their whole governance system. And I'm like, we need new budget models, we need new leadership models, we need to start thinking about things as products, not as projects, and that's a whole other, it's a whole other piece of pie. I think about this pie like the Trivial Pursuit game, right? Where you're like, oh gosh, I can't believe I landed on the leadership pie, right? I don't know anything about that. But the project piece is a real challenge. We talked about change this morning, but the fourth one is navigating through organizational barriers. And it really comes down to questioning old thinking around change, right? The whole idea that, what is it that we know about change? We've been doing change for a lot of years. It shouldn't feel this hard, and how that's different than implementation. So implementation is one thing. Training is different than change. Change is harder, right? And sometimes I think, too, the whole idea of who's doing the change. So in our world, it is the product owners that are thinking about the change, not pushing that off to some change management team, right? But another thing I'll mention here is we talk a lot about headwinds in this program, because I require leaders to remove headwinds, remove policies, change budget models. As part of my change, it's not about people changing, it's about the system changing, right? People aren't the problem a lot of the times when it comes to digital product. Like, I work in healthcare transformation. I can tell you, the problem is definitely the doctors, right? They don't want to change, but it's also the system. The system's archaic, the way it's funded is a problem, so we have to think bigger around change. And the last one is really thinking about changing the way we define value and trying to get out of that project mindset of on time, on budget, and really dedicate ourselves to business value. But I'm going to also encourage you to think about something I call systems value. And to get this point across, I'll share a story about me and my daughter. So right around the gas price hike, I was like, I drive all the time. I'm like, I need an electric vehicle. So I bought myself a Volvo XC40 Recharge. And in Canada, it's different than here. We are slow on the infrastructure, right? So we're building, but we're not really great yet. My husband made the investment a year earlier by a Tesla. So I knew the Tesla infrastructure, but I'm like, no, I like the Volvo better. It's prettier, it's a two-tone, I like it. He's like, you're gonna be disappointed. I'm like, no. Anyway, we drove from Kingston to Waterloo, and in Toronto, I pulled up to one of our charging stations, and the charger didn't work. So this second charger didn't work. I called, they're like, we can get somebody there tomorrow. I'm like, well, that really doesn't help me at all. So then I pull into another place called Flow, and I put in my, get on the app, getting my Flow thing, and then they said to me, I got an email that said, your Flow card will be in the mail. It takes 5 to 10 business days. I'm like, what? Like in a digital age, I'm like, I cannot. Anyway, this story goes on to the point we were now stranded. So now me and my daughter took our little bags, thank God we had bags, wandered off to a hotel and spent the night so that I could charge on this little charger by the Costco that basically took me 24 hours to charge my car. That is a systems value. Do you think Volvo cared? Like, I was irate, right? Volvo was like, not our problem. The chargers, not our problem. Nobody took accountability for that, so I just made a commitment to myself that every audience I'm going to talk to, I'm going to complain about this story for the rest of my life. But I think the whole point is that no one takes accountability for the system. And once everything is connected, the whole thing is, we see it all the time. You book on Expedia, you go to the hotel, not our problem, it was Expedia. But like, this is a lot of what's going on, is people passing blame from one piece to another. And that, again, to me, systems level thinking, a key digital skill in order to not leave your customers in the lurch. So that's that last pie. And at the core of this is this something that we've talked about forever, but I'm 52, and I went into this industry when I was 18. And my early life did a startup, I was in it. Like, I was right at the technology business integration piece. And then I went out of that and went to academia and started working, and I thought, wow, business technology integration is a real thing, or a lack of business technology integration. We still aren't very good at it. Many big companies still separate these two things. So that's why it becomes the core, right? How do we build? And I don't think it's telling all young people that they have to code, right? I don't think that's the solution. I think that we can kind of generate a better way, and for me, I'd rather make coding more accessible and teach engineers and chemists how to manage rather than trying to teach management people how to code. This is my take on that. So reframing, one thing I wanted to leave you with is, how do you find these people? Because my experiences is, soon as you get them trained, like soon as they want to be product people, there's lots they can go to. There's tons of different ways they can build these skills. The thing I wanted to leave you with is who you should hire. Like, where do you look for these people? And so I wish I should have included the intake for this September for this program, but I have no computer science people. I have people from chemical engineering, I have people from religion, I have people from philosophy. They're coming from everywhere. And I think, what did I look for? 4 things. And I encourage you to do the same, because this is really the 4 things that you want to look for. Look for people who value possibility, right? Bringing in that outside-in perspective. What could be? Look for people who value challenge, right? This is not easy work. Like, I would pretty much offer to say most people at the Queen's University detest me. I'm an agent for change within a very, sort of legacy-oriented company, or institution. Like, none of these people are popular. And if you do digital product work, chances are you're ticking people off. So you want people who value challenge. You want people who value discipline. This was mentioned earlier too, like Agile is not free, emancipation of control. It's a very disciplined approach. We all, so milestones, people value discipline, they'll be able to connect that to possibility. And the last one is probably the most important thing, I think, is valuing connection, right? The whole idea we are only part of a system. All these systems work together. I like to work in teams. I like people. And if you hire these people you'll be able to train them internally, get them the digital skills they need around not just technical, but all the strategy and leadership stuff too. And I do believe they will become your agents around transformation. So we are supposedly in the age of the golden age of product. So there's just astronomical growth numbers. And so this is kind of a thing you can start to see these people coming up on, different hiring platforms. And so I'll leave you with just this last little story the other way, starting with the ugly. So basically, is your organization ready? So this time, let's start with the ugly. This number basically shows less than 10% of organizations strongly agree they have the right leadership to thrive in the digital economy. That's really scary. So this is like leadership gaps at the top. We have the second one is 40% of organizations believe their organizations are taking the necessary steps. So that's good. And then lastly, just to end, the good is that today's leaders agree the new economy will need digital savvy leaders. 82% of people believe that. And if that's you, then it looks like you are in the golden age, the golden opportunity, because these skills are starting to be developed and ready for your organizations. So that's it for me. Thank you for your time.
Kathryn, thank you. That was awesome. And I can definitely relate to your story about the Volvo. I have a Volkswagen Electric. We've had some hairy times. But before you dash off, does anyone have a quick question before we oh, yeah, Steve's getting up. Here we go. Sorry. We'll do one question.
Sorry, I'm on to my time.
Question. If we look at the IRI over the last few years, about 5-6 years ago, we had a lot of conversations around the innovation management skill set and how do you think about that and the difference between kind of, I-shaped, T-shaped, different ways. And, are you really deep in an area with a little bit of breadth? And the idea was, okay, to be an innovation management leader, you really had to have breadth with some depth. The way you were describing kind of the digital product manager is very similar, right? It's more important to have that breadth as opposed to depth. And so I guess one of the challenges is, as we think about our innovation teams, is, the digital product management, is that just going to be an extension of what we do in innovation today, or is it truly different? Because you don't have to be deep in coding, you don't have to be deep. So is the systems thinking that's the unique element of this digital world versus the traditional innovation world? Or, how do we make that bridge for our teams as we go forward?
Yeah, so I like to think about it as, so there's these two different types of thinking, right? Outside-in thinking is where that's leading, I think, a lot of the innovation teams now. It's sort of customer centricity, outside-in thinking. In my experience, what's missing is the old inside-out stuff. So the old days when we used to leverage our technology competencies and the things, that to me is missing. And I'm not sure, to your point, whether that's actually one team or it's just better collaboration between teams. Because we need to leverage capabilities within the technology organization, for example. We need to leverage what our marketing teams know about marketing. We need to leverage, and I think that's the piece where these digital labs are missing out, because they seem to operate in like their own, the land of misfit toys, right? They're over there doing great things, but the companies aren't leveraging and amplifying their internal capabilities. So in our literature, we call this ambidexterity, and it really is innovation as an ambidextrous practice. And to your point, I don't know that that lives without depth in inside out and outside in. And I think that's where the systems thinking piece comes in, right? Is where you push those two things together. Yeah, no problem.
We'll sneak in one more if we do have to dash to the airport.
No, I don't.
Okay.
No.
So the first ugly you talked about, which is leaders not trusting the output of these algorithms.
Yeah.
Psychological aspect of that, I totally agree. But admittedly, essentially, some of these algorithms are essentially black boxes.
Yep.
Neural networks, things like that. Do you get them to trust them only through experience, or how else might you approach that?
Yeah, so I do a lot of trust work with paper prototyping. And I think that the way that I work with these executives is to show them just on paper how the black box is going to leverage what data it's pulling to get them to trust in the early stage prototype. So when the prototype comes out and they see the results, they knew how it was actually built. So I put a lot of investment into that upfront and early, and I keep it simple, right? They're on paper drawings. They're not showing them Figma, you know, and overwhelming them. It's just basically saying, okay, if we're going to build this decision logic, we're going to pull this data, take a look at the data. Is that the right data? Yes. Involve them in the process as much as you can. But it's different than those old days of like peer programming. That's not what I'm talking about. It's executive level meetings and communication that actually opens up those discussions. And my experience has been a lot of senior leaders will engage now because they know they're technical enough. They know, some of them still won't, but if you can at least get one that's going to sit and really be your champion, I'm finding a lot of value in that sort of paper prototyping, decks that really get into how these things are being built upfront and early. Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
We'll
Thanks.
let you go now.
Okay.
Thanks, Kathryn.